The crisp October morning air carried the familiar scent of autumn leaves through downtown Newark, New Jersey. Shaquille O'Neal pulled his black SUV into a parking spot outside his favorite coffee shop on Broad Street, the same place he'd been visiting since his teenage years. At 52, the basketball legend still drew stares wherever he went, but this particular morning felt different, quieter, more reflective. Shaq stepped out of his vehicle, his massive 711 frame casting a long shadow on the cracked sidewalk. The city had changed dramatically since his childhood in the 1980s. Gentrification had transformed many neighborhoods, but pockets of struggle remained visible. Boarded-up storefronts mixed with trendy cafes, luxury condos rising beside weathered housing projects. As he walked toward the coffee shop entrance, something caught his peripheral vision. Huddled against the brick wall of an abandoned building across the street sat a figure wrapped in a tattered brown jacket, a cardboard sign resting against his knees. The man's head was down, dark hair streaked with premature gray, hands clasped around a worn paper cup. Shaq paused, studying the figure more closely. There was something familiar about the way the man held his shoulders slightly hunched forward, a posture he remembered from countless hours spent on basketball courts and in classrooms decades ago. "Marcus?" Shaq whispered to himself, his heart beginning to race. The homeless man looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps. Their eyes met across the 15 feet of cracked asphalt, and time seemed to freeze. The face was weathered, scarred by years of hardship, but the eyes, those same bright brown eyes that had once sparkled with mischief and dreams, were unmistakably familiar. "Shaq?" Marcus Thompson's voice cracked, barely audible above the morning traffic. Is that really you?" Without hesitation, Shaq crossed the street, his expensive sneakers crunching on broken glass and debris. He knelt down beside his childhood best friend, his knees touching the cold concrete. Up close, he could see the toll that life had taken on Marcus, the hollow cheeks, the premature lines around his eyes, the way his clothes hung loose on his diminished frame. "Marcus, man, what happened to you?" Shaq's voice was thick with emotion, his usually confident demeanor replaced by genuine concern and disbelief. Marcus looked away, shame washing over his features. "Life happened, Shaq. Life happened in ways I never saw coming." The two men sat in silence for a moment, the weight of lost years settling between them. Shaq remembered the last time he'd seen Marcus, graduation day at Robert Treat Academy, both of them 18 and full of dreams. Marcus had been accepted to Rutgers on a partial academic scholarship, planning to study engineering. Shaq was headed to LSU, already being recruited by college basketball programs across the country. "I followed your career, you know," Marcus said quietly, managing a weak smile. "Every game, every championship. I was so proud, man. So proud to tell people I knew you before you were famous." Shaq felt his throat tighten. "Why didn't you ever reach out? I would have helped. You know I would have helped." Marcus shrugged, his fingers fidgeting with the frayed edges of his jacket. "Pride, I guess. Didn't want to be another person asking the famous athlete for money. Thought I could figure it out on my own." As they talked, memories flooded back. Summer afternoons shooting hoops at the local court, sharing dreams of making it out of Newark, studying together for tests, defending each other against neighborhood bullies. Marcus had been the smart one, the one with the plans and the backup plans. Seeing him like this felt like looking at an alternate reality where everything had gone wrong. "Tell me what happened," Shaq said gently, settling more comfortably on the sidewalk beside his friend. "We've got time." Marcus stared down at his hands as he began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. The story came out in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror reflecting a life that had slowly fallen apart. "Remember how excited I was about Rutgers?" Marcus began, his eyes distant. "First semester went great. Dean's list even. I was going to be an engineer, maybe work for NASA someday. You remember how we used to talk about that?" Shaq nodded, remembering countless conversations about rockets and space shuttles. During their teenage years, Marcus had always been fascinated by how things worked, taking apart radios and rebuilding them, explaining complex theories with the patience of a natural teacher. Second year, Mom got sick, Marcus continued, his voice growing heavier. Cancer. Pancreatic. The insurance didn't cover everything. And Dad? He was working 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. I had to drop out to help with medical bills and take care of her. The autumn wind picked up, rustling the leaves around them. Shaq pulled off his jacket and draped it around Marcus's shoulders without a word. She fought for 2 years, Marcus said, pulling the jacket tighter. 2 years of chemo, radiation, surgery. We sold everything. The house, Dad's truck, even my textbooks. When she died, we were broke, and I was lost. Shaq listened in silence, his heart breaking for his friend. He remembered Mrs. Thompson, a kind woman who had always welcomed him into their modest home, who had made the best fried chicken in the neighborhood and never let him leave without a plate wrapped in foil. I tried to go back to school, Marcus continued, but the grief, the debt, the pressure, I started drinking. Just beer at first, you know? Something to help me sleep, to quiet the thoughts. But it escalated. Lost my job at the warehouse. Dad couldn't look at me anymore. Said I reminded him too much of Mom's disappointment. The pain in Marcus's voice was palpable. Shaq wanted to interrupt, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but he sensed his friend needed to get this out. Things got worse after Dad died 5 years ago. Heart attack, stress, the doctors said. I inherited his debts along with the grief. Started using harder stuff to cope. Lost my apartment, lost my girlfriend, lost everything. Marcus finally looked up at Shaq, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. I've been on the streets for 3 years now. 3 years of shelters when I'm lucky, doorways when I'm not. I tried getting clean, tried getting work, but when you don't have an address, when you smell like the streets, when your hands shake from withdrawal, nobody wants to give you a chance. The weight of his friend's story settled over Shaq like a heavy blanket. Here was someone who had started with the same dreams, the same potential, but had been crushed by circumstances beyond his control. The randomness of it all, the fact that it could have been him in that situation, made Shaq's success feel both precious and precarious. I'm not asking for anything, Marcus said quickly, misreading Shaq's contemplative silence. I know you probably think I'm just another addict looking for a handout. I can't believe you're here. After all these years, sitting here with me like we're kids again. Shaq shook his head firmly. You're not just anything, Marcus. You're my brother. You're the guy who helped me with algebra when I was failing. You're the guy who stood up to Derek Williams when he was bullying kids half his size. You're the guy who believed I could make it to the NBA before I even believed it myself. A small group of passers-by had begun to notice the unusual sight. One of the most recognizable athletes in the world sitting on a sidewalk with a homeless man. Some pulled out phones to take pictures. Others whispered among themselves. Shaq ignored them all, his attention focused entirely on his friend. I want to help, Shaq said simply. But I need to know, do you want help? Real help, not just money or a meal. I'm talking about getting clean, getting back on your feet, rebuilding your life. It's going to be hard work, and it's going to take time. Marcus looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Why would you do that for me? You don't owe me anything. Because that's what friends do, Shaq replied. Because you would have done the same for me. Because everyone deserves a second chance, especially someone as good as you. The sincerity in Shaq's voice broke through Marcus's defenses. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a life beyond the streets, beyond the daily struggle for survival. I want to try, Marcus whispered. God, I want to try so bad. But I've failed so many times. Then we'll try together, Shaq said, standing up and extending his hand. Starting right now. The Restoration Center in East Orange, New Jersey wasn't the kind of place Shaquille O'Neal typically visited, but he'd done his research. Dr. Sarah Chen, the facility's director, had built a reputation for her compassionate yet no-nonsense approach to addiction recovery. Her program focused on treating the whole person, addressing not just the substance abuse, but the underlying trauma and circumstances that led to it. Mr. O'Neal, Dr. Chen said as she led Shaq and Marcus through the facility's main corridor. I have to be honest with you. Celebrity endorsements and good intentions don't guarantee success. Recovery is about the individual's commitment to change, not external motivation. Shaq nodded, appreciating her directness. I understand, Doc. But Marcus here, he's got more strength than he knows. I've seen him overcome things before. It had been a week since their reunion on the street. Shaq had immediately arranged for Marcus to stay in a clean motel room, providing him with clothes, meals, and most importantly, hope. But both men knew that the real work was just beginning. The intake process was thorough and emotionally draining. Marcus sat across from Dr. Chen's desk, filling out forms that asked him to confront the full scope of his addiction. Shaq waited in the lobby, fielding calls from his agent and business manager, who couldn't understand why he was spending so much time and money on some homeless guy. He's not some homeless guy, Shaq had explained to his team. He's family, and family doesn't give up on family. The first month was the hardest. Marcus went through detox with the intensity of a man who had been self-medicating for years. Shaq visited every day that his schedule allowed, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes sharing stories from their childhood, always providing a consistent presence that reminded Marcus he wasn't alone. I had a dream last night, Marcus told him during one visit. They were sitting in the center's garden, autumn giving way to winter, the trees now bare against the gray sky. I dreamed I was back in college, sitting in my engineering class. Professor was explaining how bridges are built, how they need strong foundations to handle the weight, how they need flexibility to withstand stress. Shaq smiled. Sounds like a good dream. It was, Marcus agreed. Made me think about rebuilding my life like building a bridge. Foundation first, then the structure, then the decorative parts. Can't skip steps. The group therapy sessions were particularly challenging. Marcus found himself surrounded by people with similar stories: addiction, loss, trauma, the gradual erosion of hope. But there were also success stories. People who had been clean for months or years, who had rebuilt relationships, who had found purpose again. The hardest part, Marcus confided to Shaq one evening, is forgiving myself. I keep thinking about all the choices I made, all the opportunities I wasted. How do you come back from that? Shaq thought about his own mistakes over the years, failed relationships, business decisions he regretted, times when his ego had gotten in the way of better judgment. You don't come back from it, he said finally. You move forward from it. There's a difference. As winter deepened, Marcus began to show signs of real progress. His hands stopped shaking, his eyes cleared, and slowly the friend Shaq remembered began to emerge from beneath years of pain and addiction. Marcus started helping other residents with their intake paperwork, using his natural intelligence and compassion to ease their transition into the program. Dr. Chen noticed the change too. Marcus has become one of our peer mentors, she told Shaq during one of their regular check-ins. He has a gift for connecting with people who are struggling. It's helping his own recovery, but it's also helping others. The media had begun to take notice of Shaq's frequent visits to the treatment center. Social media posts and paparazzi photos sparked speculation about his involvement in charity work. Sports reporters started asking questions during interviews, but Shaq deflected most inquiries, protecting Marcus's privacy while the healing process continued. I'm ready to start looking for work, Marcus announced one afternoon in February. Dr. Chen says I'm ready for the next phase. Shaq had been prepared for this moment. Through his network of business contacts, he had quietly arranged several job interviews, entry-level positions that would give Marcus a chance to prove himself without the pressure of his past defining him. The first interview was at a construction company in Newark. Marcus wore a suit that Shaq had bought him, his hair neatly trimmed, his hands steady. The foreman, a gruff man named Tony Ricci, looked skeptical when Marcus walked in. Says here you've got a college background, Tony said, reviewing the application. Why you want to do manual labor? Because I need to start somewhere, Marcus replied honestly. I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to work hard and prove myself. Something in Marcus's tone must have resonated with Tony. We'll try you out for a week. Show up on time, work hard, no drama. If it works out, we'll talk about making it permanent." That night, Marcus called Shaq with excitement in his voice, an emotion that had been absent for too long. "I got the job, man. It's just construction work, but it's a start." "It's not just construction work," Shaq corrected him. "It's your foundation. Remember what you said about building bridges?" 2 years later, the Newark Community Center buzzed with activity as local residents, city officials, and media representatives gathered for the grand opening of the Marcus Thompson Learning Lab. The facility, funded by Shaq's Foundation and other donors, was designed to provide educational support and mentorship for at-risk youth in the community. Marcus stood at the podium, clean-shaven and wearing a crisp blue shirt, hardly recognizable as the broken man Shaq had found on the street. His voice was strong and clear as he addressed the crowd. "4 years ago I was sleeping in doorways, believing that my life was over," he began. "I had convinced myself that I was too far gone, that the mistakes I'd made defined who I would always be. But a friend, someone I hadn't seen in 20 years, reminded me that our stories don't end with our failures. They begin again with our choice to keep going." Shaq sat in the front row, his usual larger-than-life presence subdued by pride and emotion. Watching Marcus speak to the community about resilience and second chances felt like witnessing a miracle, not a supernatural one, but the kind that happens when human compassion meets determination. The Learning Lab was Marcus's idea, born from his desire to help other young people avoid the pitfalls that had derailed his own life. Working alongside Dr. Chen and educational specialists, he had developed programs that combined academic support with life skills training and mentorship. The facility offered tutoring, college preparation, financial literacy classes, and counseling services, all free to neighborhood families. "Mr. Thompson," a young reporter asked during the Q&A session, "what would you say to other people who are struggling with addiction or homelessness?" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'd say that rock bottom can be a foundation if you're willing to build on it. Recovery isn't just about getting clean. It's about discovering who you are when you're not running from pain. And it's about accepting help when it's offered, even when your pride tells you not to." After the formal program ended, Shaq and Marcus walked through the Learning Lab together, observing teenagers working on homework, adults practicing job interview skills, and families attending financial planning workshops. The space hummed with purpose and possibility. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said as they paused to watch a group of kids working on a science project. "It's not that I got my life back, it's that I found a better life than I ever imagined." Shaq nodded, understanding completely. "You're helping people the same way you helped me when we were kids. Remember when I wanted to quit basketball because I thought I wasn't good enough? You're the one who convinced me to keep practicing." "I don't remember that," Marcus said with a smile. "I do," Shaq replied. "You told me that talent without persistence is just potential. That's what you're teaching these kids now." Over the following months, the Marcus Thompson Learning Lab became a model for community-based intervention programs. Educational researchers studied its methods, and similar facilities began opening in other cities. Marcus found himself invited to speak at conferences and universities, sharing his expertise in both addiction recovery and educational outreach. The media attention that followed their story was overwhelming at first. News outlets wanted to focus on the celebrity angle, the famous athlete rescuing his childhood friend. But Shaq consistently redirected the narrative toward Marcus's work and the broader issues of addiction, homelessness, and community support. "This isn't about me being a hero," Shaq told a national television interviewer. "This is about what happens when we see people who are struggling as human beings deserving of dignity and support, not problems to be avoided or ignored." Marcus's relationship with his own recovery remained a daily commitment. He attended AA meetings regularly, continued therapy sessions, and maintained the support network he had built during his time at the treatment center. He also began dating again, a relationship with Lisa, a social worker he met through his community outreach work. "I never thought I'd have a normal life again," Marcus confided to Shaq one evening, as they sat on the steps of the Learning Lab, watching the sunset over Newark. "I mean, I know I'll always be in recovery, always have to be careful. But I have work that matters, people who depend on me, a future that looks bright. Shaq smiled, remembering the hopeless man he'd found on the street 3 years earlier. You know what I learned from all this? I thought I was helping you, but you helped me too. Reminded me what really matters. All the money, all the fame. It doesn't mean anything if you can't use it to lift people up. The two friends sat in comfortable silence, watching their old neighborhood transform around them. New businesses were opening, families were moving in, young people were staying in school. The Learning Lab had become more than an education center. It was a symbol of hope and renewal. You think those kids in there know they're getting life lessons from a guy who used to live on the streets? Marcus asked. I think that's exactly why they listen to you, Shaq replied. You're not just teaching them math and science, you're showing them that no matter how far you fall, you can get back up. As the sky darkened and the streetlights came on, the two men stood up and walked back toward the Learning Lab, where evening classes were beginning. Through the windows they could see teenagers bent over textbooks, adults practicing computer skills, and families working together on homework assignments. Same time tomorrow? Marcus asked as they reached the entrance. Wouldn't miss it, Shaq replied. We've got work to do. The story of Shaq and Marcus had become more than a tale of friendship and redemption. It had become a blueprint for how communities could support their most vulnerable members. It demonstrated that behind every person experiencing homelessness or addiction was a human being with dignity, potential, and worth. Most importantly, it showed that with compassion, commitment, and the right support systems, anyone could rebuild their life and find purpose again. Their friendship, rekindled on a cold sidewalk in Newark, had grown into something neither man had expected, a partnership dedicated to ensuring that others wouldn't have to face their darkest moments alone. In helping Marcus rebuild his life, Shaq had discovered his own greater purpose. In accepting that help, Marcus had found not just recovery, but a calling that would impact countless others. The Marcus Thompson Learning Lab stood as a testament to both men's journey, a place where second chances were not just possible, but expected, where past mistakes became stepping stones to future success, and where the simple act of refusing to give up on someone could change the trajectory of an entire community.